Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports, another special edition with no game to prepare for this week. But we do have a bowl bid, everybody. We know who the opponent is. We do know the location of this bowl, game. So I'll give you a week in review, the first week of December for today's episode, and I want to hit on a few different points. First, talking about this Duke's Mayo Bowl, talking about the transfer portal opening up for West Virginia football, talking about the president of the NCAA, Charlie Miller's proposal for a new subdivision to be created within Division 1 potentially, and then we'll talk about West Virginia on the basketball court last night facing off against the hated Pitt Panthers in the Backyard BasketBrawl. So, and all these themes kind of tie together. So, first and foremost, kind of looking back from whenever I talked with you all last week, we were waiting on the conference championship games to play out. We were waiting on the college football playoff committee to pick their 4 teams, and holy moly, since we don't necessarily, this program is dedicated to West Virginia sports, and those top 4 teams not really having anything to do with West Virginia, I won't really spend a lot of time on those, but maybe I can talk about that in my time talking about the new football subdivision proposal. So, West Virginia, it was late into the afternoon on Sunday afternoon. I think it was like 5, 6 o'clock Eastern. If you were following social media, scrolling and refreshing Twitter like every 30 minutes, like I was, trying to find out what was happening to the Mountaineers, you remember Mike Kazaza, I think, was first on the news, as he most often is. His sources and the people he knows within the athletic department, he gets the scoop first, with just like alongside Hoppy Kercheval, like 9 times out of 10, it seems like, from the West Virginia sports media. So, first on the prowl, hearing that West Virginia's rights against essentially were traded to the Duke's Mayo Bowl, which is usually supposed to pit, I think, like an ACC team and either an SEC, I think an ACC and SEC team. Well, anyway, so with Florida State getting booted out of the college football playoff, kind of shook up the AC, and I think the ACC leadership were just shocked that Florida State wasn't going to a bowl game, so it had to scramble with its bowl-eligible teams. The Big 12 had too many for a bowl, so instead of potentially going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl, I think that's what it really came down to, was the Pop-Tarts Bowl and the Duke's Mayo Bowl, K-State and West Virginia. And since Louisville wasn't in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, going instead to the Holiday Bowl to face USC, I really wouldn't have cared too much to play NC State. I know they're a ranked opponent, came on hot late in the season, have Tony Gibson as their defensive coordinator. So intriguing in a way. Orlando, a great location, but I like this one even better. So the Duke's Mayo Bowl against North Carolina, whole lot better than the alternative, which was being reported by some outlets of West Virginia potentially going to the Birmingham Bowl to face Toledo, or as early as Saturday morning, Brett McMurphy with Stadium or The Athletic reporting that West Virginia was going to play in the very first bowl game against Cal in the Independence Bowl. So I'm really thankful for not that. North Carolina, an intriguing opponent, much more so if Drake May plays at quarterback. We'll break all this down either right before or right after Christmas, before the game, for the pregame show, so you'll be able to tune in for that in just a couple of weeks. We're getting closer and closer, people. To Christmas and then the bowl game. So I'll break it down for you later, but got a lot of high-powered offense, just like West Virginia does, score more points per game. Tez Walker at wide receiver, who they really fought the NCAA for to get eligibility, and comes on to be their leading receiver. Omarion, I forget his last name off the top of my head here. Let me get so at running back, I really like their running back too. Omarion Hampton, just a sophomore from the state of North Carolina, 234 carries for 1,400 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns on the season. So they have an offense. Their defense is optional. So it's going to be a fun flying matchup, especially if Drake May decides to play in it. He may, since he's from Charlotte, so it would kind of be a great, end to his college career before he goes pro. But I get it that these first-round projected draft picks, especially at quarterback, do not play in bowl games unless you're playing in the college football playoff in the year of our Lord 2023. So we'll see what happens if May decides to opt out, and we'll talk about that game in a few weeks. So, and it's a long time off for West Virginia, having played there at the end of November, so like a full month to prepare for this game. To heal up, get ready, end the semester, students taking finals this week and into next week. So I think West Virginia will also bring its best effort, wants to play in this bowl game. It's not like, Penn State or not Penn State, Florida State thinking about trying to protest the bowl game they're in, or like Oregon. Does Oregon even really need to play their starters against Liberty into the second half? So it's like bowl games are so wishy-washy in today's world, it seems like. So look at how many players have already hit the transfer portal this year, so you're not going to have those players that are transfer eligible unless they say, I guess Grayson McCall's going to play for Coastal Carolina before he ultimately transfers. So it's just weird. Just bowl games are very weird in today's world. They used to mean something. They used to mean a whole lot more before the college football playoff with just 2 additional teams compared to the BCS. So now it's like New Year's Six is even watered down. Chop Robinson at Penn State not playing in their bowl game. But back more on North Carolina, not a ranked opponent, but was one for a majority of the season. I think this is a measuring stick game for Neil Brown. A win will springboard West Virginia into the 2024 season, which will start right after this bowl game with a lot of momentum. I think a blowout loss, especially if North Carolina is playing a backup quarterback, puts Neil Brown back onto the very same hot seat that he came into the 2023 season on. So it'll be ratchet right back up there if West Virginia doesn't put on a good showing. And I think does need to win this game and can even win this game in the similar fashion as they did against Baylor. And win in the very final seconds by just 3 points, but needing to win, I think to leave the season with a good taste in your mouth and to jump into 2024. Otherwise, the anti-Brown faction of the West Virginia fan base will be at the same level of outspokenness as they were all off season. And then every time West Virginia didn't play to their expectations in losses and in wins. So, and the other thing, West Virginia hasn't beaten a Power 5 opponent in a bowl game in 8 years since that 2015 Skylar Howard-led Cactus Bowl against Arizona State out in the desert. So a late one. Remember West Virginia playing in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl 2 years ago with Jared Deggy at the helm, losing in maybe the most boring football game I think I've ever watched, 18-6. And he just got crushed. So I think there will be a lot of intrigue. Talk more about that matchup in a couple of weeks. So happy West Virginia's in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. So now, Monday, the transfer portal opened. And we already knew of a few players who were already anticipating. Cortez Bram and Jeremiah Aaron pretty much self-redshirted, opted out of the season, week 4 of this season. So you already knew they were out of town. Davis Mallinger was reported he was leaving the team before the season, and I think either before the Baylor game or the Cincinnati game, you knew he was leaving, so out of town. Christian Stokes announced last week, right before the transfer portal opened, and now the new guys who have declared for the portal this week, 3 of them. Jashawn Polk. So changes my transfer grade from not available because he didn't play this year to an F for him on this team. I hope that Country Roads Trust didn't pay him a dime for this season apparently not be injured, to only play, I think, 11 snaps for the whole season. Really never heard his name other than, I think, one catch that he had in the Duquesne game. If this was a money grab, this was just a failed move by Country Roads Trust in West Virginia to bring him in, being a guy who was on the outside looking in at potentially one of the best return men in the Big 12 Conference, came in with Montre Miller from Kent State, and you get nothing out of him. And now he hits the portal again to go elsewhere and use his last year of eligibility. So sayonara, F grade for having him on the team. The one of substance that kind of hurts, but I understand is Hershey McLaurin announcing today that he was gonna go to the portal, 1 year remaining. I think a guy who was going to slot right in there across from Anthony Wilson on one side and Aubrey Burks on the other in the middle of this West Virginia defense and start. I don't know with Stokes now transferring, I don't know if necessarily Raleigh Collins was going to overtake him for that starting role, maybe. But I mean, he came on strong, really did. When Aubrey Burks went down with that neck injury, I think it was in the TCU game, McLaurin stepped up, really did. Had a good year. I think like a prove-it year that he does belong. He would have slotted right in to be a starter in 2024. So it's got to be over NIL money. If West Virginia was shortchanging him or just thinking that he could make more elsewhere, who knows if he'll come back. Doubtful, very doubtful. I think he's going to want to try and go to another Power 5 program that's going to pay him more to be that needs someone at the starting position, or at least he'll contend. So a little weird. He comes up from the JUCO ranks, comes here for 2 seasons, plays really well, projected with his last year to be at that starting position, and then decides to hit the portal. So don't really understand that move. I think it's due to money, so it is what it is. The last one, I was celebrating. I was loving it. Thank God. Addition by subtraction. Andrew Wilson Lamp is gone, everybody. The worst Mountaineer that West Virginia's had since Pat Miller in 2012. Mr. Personal Foul himself. The best thing that he ever contributed to West Virginia was knocking out Blake Shapen in that 2022 Baylor game at home when Shapen and the Bears were just running roughshod on West Virginia's defense, goes to slide, and Wilson tattoos him helmet to helmet as he's sliding. Oh, so I hope someone just makes like an F it Andrew Wilson Lamp highlights on Twitter someday. So if you're following me and you have those editing skills, please do so, because it's just like, never have to worry about him and his punt return coverage ever again. Send him to the G5 somewhere. Like, I hope he finds somewhere that he can like just be reckless, or hopefully he transfers to Pitt, because then he can spear their punt returner and cost them a game against Georgia Tech or something next year. So that would be great. So sayonara, Andrew Wilson Lamp, Jashawn Polk, and Hershey McLaurin. That one hurts. So Neil Brown did say at the beginning of the week, he gave a it wasn't a live streamed video conference, press conference, but a couple of quotes that came out from my friend Skylar Callahan at West Virginia Sports Illustrated Mountaineers Now tweeted earlier this week that, and these kind of spoke to some of the things that I talked about in my last video about retention and transfer recruitment. Secondary being the primary focus, and that's obvious now. If West Virginia can get a medical red shirt for Montre Miller to come back, I think he slots in either at cornerback number 1 or cornerback number 2. If they can get him. Otherwise, you're looking at Jacoby Spells as your most like upper class cornerback on this roster. So corner obviously is either like getting 1 or 2 guys. I would think West Virginia might even go get 2 guys at that position. Now at the safeties, missing out at McLaurin, you need a starter there. Have some guys who are underclassmen who might come in and contribute. Raleigh Collins, probably the number 1 guy. I know we didn't see Aiden Tagaloa Nelson at all this year, so maybe he's a guy that contributes more as a redshirt freshman next year, maybe even on special teams. Also at linebacker is another position that that Neil Brown wants to get, and I don't know, because I can see Josiah Trotter. I can see Ben Cutter, I can see Trey Lathan when he comes back healthy. So those are like 3 guys, a guy who can rotate. Tyron Bradley I talked about on my last week's episode, and Jarrett Bartlett has another year of eligibility. So I don't necessarily know, and like I've already talked about this at nauseum, that West Virginia schematically, defensively, I think they need a shakeup. So at that linebacker position, I don't necessarily know if you need to go out there and go spend. Pass rusher, or I guess This pass rusher and offensive line, I mean, in the trenches, are always vitally important. So anybody who follows a good football team will tell you that. So I'm always out there looking for guys who are going to go out there and make plays. But one other position that Brown noted being one proven guy at wide receiver, and that was a quote there. So I don't know about that one either, because I guess, like, it would be nice to have. And they're, like, looking at a guy in Jacory or Macklin, cousin, I think, of Jeremy Macklin from North Texas. So there's a, Ren Baker, North Texas connection there, I guess. But adding a guy like that, I don't know what you're looking for. If you're just trying to replace Devin Carter, I don't know. I think you're going to have that in Traylon Ray next year. I think you're already, you'll have another year of Preston Fox, who came on strong as your, like, third wide receiver. Just kind of looking at my roster that I put together. So yeah, if you look at Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher, we haven't seen very much of Jarrell Williams, who will be going into his third year with the program, Preston Fox, and then E.J. Horton. And then you're bringing in a 4-star wide receiver from one of the best high school programs in the country, definitely in the state of Pennsylvania, and Brandon Raymond from St. Joe's Prep. So, like, there's 6 wide receivers there. And we always see what happens whenever West Virginia has too many wide receivers on the team. Is like they all get frustrated wanting their targets, and then, they transfer out. So, I mean, after it seemed like whenever West Virginia lost all those transfers after 2021, that Brown said that we're not now in this portal era going to keep we're going to keep fewer guys at the wide receiver position on the roster. So, with that many said right there, that's Ray, Gallagher, Williams, Fox, Horton, and Raymond. That's 6 wide receivers right there. Do you really need another one? I know for depth purposes, and if anybody goes down with injury, but I don't know if you need to necessarily insert any sort of like a Devin Carter-esque type number 1 receiver that you need to go out there and spend the bank and NIL dollars on. I think if you can go do that along the offensive line to replace the loss of Nestor, because I think Brandon Yates is going to slide over in at center for next season with Jaquay Hubbard to his right. So finding someone at right tackle and then going out there addressing these secondary needs at safety and corner, and then trying to find someone to rush the passer, maybe on the inside. Guy I've been wanting to see is Justin Benton. I was really salty last signing day last year when he signed at Houston. I know for NIL money, I know Holgerson and co. swooped in at the last minute to steal him off West Virginia. So it really is on him for falling. I don't want to say falling for it, but it's like for ending up choosing Houston. But I'm wondering if now with the coaching change, is he going to want to stay, or is he going to want to hit the portal, and can West Virginia get another guy in the interior defensive line? So I'd love to have some beefy guys on that defensive line, so to add them into the fold. West Virginia right now, following on social media, is going after a mix of targets from all levels, from as low as D2 all the way up to now the Power 4. A couple of guys like I've seen just to throw out here: Gino Vandemark, an offensive lineman from Michigan State; Josh Mickens, a corner from Louisville; Cameron Martinez, a hybrid cornerback or safety from Ohio State; and now Jermod McCoy, cornerback from Oregon State. Might be I already mentioned Macklin, but those are some of the highlights from the P4 conference. So the thing I always say with these, and like we're seeing a couple of guys who are already going to be visiting tomorrow, Aiden Garnes from Duquesne. Remember him talking about that in the Duquesne preview video? He'd come off, I think, week 1 having 2 interceptions. So West Virginia, having played Duquesne, think he liked the atmosphere, thinks he could see himself playing as a Mountaineer. So who knows? We might get a player from Duquesne that West Virginia faced off in this regular season. It's always important to see if they visit. If they visit, then that's saying something. So these players entering the portal, West Virginia offering them a scholarship is nice, but then it comes down to getting them on campus, seeing if they can feel and fit into the program, and then obviously dollars and cents and NIL money. So that's the most important, is to seeing whether these transfer prospects that they're targeting in the portal visit. Another thing I found interesting this week, following Country Roads Trust on Twitter, they're now announcing partnerships. I'm a little confused by it. Saw the graph, like it says like committed. Wyatt Milam, Cole Taylor, Traylon Ray, Josiah Trotter, Tomas Remack, Brandon Yates, Preston Fox. So are these essentially recommitments that they are coming back for 2024? I think this is a bit of a double-edged sword of a move. I mean, I like it. Be that it lets fans know that these players will be returning, and that's what I think I'm kind of reporting to you now on these guys. And those, I mean, Milam, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. I mean, I think most people think that he's probably the most important returner, right alongside Garrett Green and Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson to bring back for this season. So I mean, having Milam in there, like, wow, that. Maybe the first offer offered by Country Roads Trust was accepted, given the portal. I don't think anybody was having any conversations with any of the players until after that West Virginia got back from that Baylor game. So being offered last week into this week, and they're already saying that they're going to be committing for 2024. That's awesome. So why I say it's a double-edged sword, it's also we now know, in my belief, of who's getting paid and who's not. So who's getting an NIL deal on the roster and who's still just playing for a scholarship and some spending money here and there. It's also going to have us speculating, I feel like, waiting on pins and needles on this indispensable list. So as for this program, will be tracking that very closely over the course of the next month, to see what happens with those guys on that indispensable list that I talked about, and so far so good. I didn't think that Hershey McLaurin was indispensable. I thought of the three guys in the secondary, he was probably the one that you could afford to necessarily let go, not Aubrey Burks. So, with that being said, I'll be watching to see what Country Roads tweets over this next month, and these commitments of having a deals put together. And I just think it's just going to lead to a hairy situation that we're speculating if C.J. Donaldson doesn't. If there's not a graphic about C.J. Donaldson for the next month, are we assuming that oh no, C.J. Donaldson's being courted by other teams out there and might be considering transferring? So I don't like that. The question I want to ask, I really we don't know this answer, and I don't know if we'll ever get this answer as fans, is has the cost of West Virginia's players gone up, given how they performed this season and what their NIL value? And then adding on to that is, can Country Roads Trust re-sign these guys while saving enough in the war chest to go get some high-quality guys out of the portal? Now, I get that this is a long process, and I feel like the timing is terrible. You just finished the regular season 2 weeks ago, and I mean, Army-Navy still playing, just had conference championships for many of these teams across the country. You open up the transfer portal. The signing day for high school recruits is December 20th. And now the portal's opening up, so these teams that are trying to prepare for their bowl games are also trying to re-recruit their players to commit for 2024. So you're already looking ahead there from a roster management standpoint. You're trying to play a game in a few weeks, and at the same time, you're thinking about all these 1,500 other players that are in the portal, and where can we upgrade? What have we already committed to these high school recruits in NIL dollars? Now what are we going to spend for transfer recruiting? And how much money has West Virginia raised? One of the things that I thought was very interesting, and big fan of the Raspy Voice kids, Brandon and Jeremy Phoenix from the Raspy Voice Kids podcast, and they had on Amanda Mazey from Country Roads Trust, who also does a lot of reporting for Blue Gold Nation and this and that, and obviously wife of the head baseball coach. And very interesting last week that they were she had Brandon guess how many members are contributors to Country Roads Trust. And he was like, oh, I don't know, I'll just throw a number out there and say 1,000. She was like, no, 700. And I gotta tell you, my jaw kind of just dropped because I was really shocked by that. I think it just goes to show how far behind the 8 ball that West Virginia was in 2021, even into 2022. But I mean, at least it was starting to get kicked off, and really how they're like the strategic plan, by all those people who are on that advisory board. I think it was almost honestly just like, hey, we're going to start this thing. You win. You want to have your name attached to this? And like guys like Pat McAfee said, yeah, of course. And Oliver Luck said, yeah, but I don't want to have to do anything. Like now it seems like it's finally off and running. Obviously the Trust Lager was a great move. The new bourbon that they just launched, like Country Roads Trust is I think it's legit. I think that On3 naming it one of the top 10 most aggressive collectives in college athletics, like I think those are all fantastic accomplishments. I just wonder how much money they potentially have, contributed by programs, because I still think that there's a disconnect and just lack of understanding from the people who have a lot more money than I do and are making, 5, maybe even 6-digit donations to West Virginia. And the other big thing is, as I've said on this program many a times, is that NIL collectives, specifically Country Roads Trust in this opinion, are not tax deductible, are not 501c3s like the Mountaineer Athletic Club is, like the athletic department, West Virginia University. So someone can make a 5-6-digit donation to West Virginia University, or specifically the athletic department, Mountaineer Athletic Club, and that's all tax deductible. You can't do that with Country Roads Trust, and that's what happened. Got Texas A&M in a lot of trouble with the IRS, and that was reported within the last 6 months. So I'm glad to see that, like, just from that interview with Brandon and Amanda, that now Country Roads Trust has gotten over 1,000, over 1,100, and they're off and rolling. So it takes people, like them, like me, who's just been starting off making these videos for this season, to continuing to say that Country Roads Trust is the most important thing for Mountaineer athletics going forward. It's not about facilities, and that's why I think like a school like South Florida, who is investing, I think it's like $500 million into their football facilities that now isn't even going to be done until 2027. And like, I honestly think they should just scrap the project, because that's over. That whole everything with facilities, the barber shops, the pool tables, the lights, the fancy locker rooms, indoor outdoor practice facility, yada yada yada, throw that out the door. I mean, I watch all these press conferences with the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I live here in southwestern Pennsylvania. And I mean, it looks like their locker room isn't any nicer than my local high school. Probably my local high school is even nicer than theirs. But yet they're getting paid. So it's like, that's what these players now care for. They don't care about your facilities. I know that, like, yes, academic support and professional development and obviously prospects at playing at the NFL, but for all the, other 98 to 99% of the players who don't go professionally, like the fifth quarter program that Neil Brown started and everything else, very important. And yes, you got to have, like standard facilities, but it's just like, now it's all about NIL money, and can you compete with the Jimmies and the Joes in that arena? In the dark webs of college football, do you have enough in your war chest that you can go out there and go, and say, hey, this is what we're going to present to you, this is how much we're going to pay you, and then, to join our football team. It is professional football now for 18 to 23-year-olds. I think that's a good segue for what I really wanted to talk about for this entire program. And I know we're already 29 minutes in, but this is, I feel like, what the meat of what I want to talk about is NCAA President Charlie Miller's new proposal for a new subdivision to be created in Division I. And I kind of want to give you the highlights just so I can set the stage for you. So Tuesday morning, it was sort of reported by The Athletic that he included the following recommendations. The formation of a new subdivision made up of institutions with the highest resources that can directly compensate athletes through an enhanced educational trust fund, which requires the schools that opt into it an investment of at least $30,000 per year per athlete for at least half of the school's eligible athletes. Schools would have to adhere to Title IX, providing equal monetary opportunities for both female and male athletes. Schools in the new subdivision could create their own rules separate from the rest of Division I, and those rules would allow them the ability to address policies such as scholarship limits and roster size, as well as transfers and NIL. And any Division I school would be able to enter into an NIL deal with its athletes directly, which is not currently permissible because of the whole Title IX, and that's why they don't want to do it. Any Division I school would be able to distribute to any athlete funding related to educational benefits without any caps on such compensation. So I think this is a starting point. This is the roughest of rough drafts, but at least he's acknowledging what previous NCAA President Mark Emmert and even previous leadership going back decades refused to acknowledge, is that without giving the title of employee, that student athletes, especially at Division I Power 5 football, between your hours that you have to put into practice and then games and training, it is really necessarily a full-time job. And because of the money that is made by the schools on the backs of these athletes, by the cable dollars, the money just essentially got too big, and by all of the lawsuits that came down in the Supreme Court pretty much saying that players have to be able to benefit off their own likeness, like that just seemed like the writing was on the wall for that for a long time, and enough people in our sue-happy society finally just said, all right, we're going to go do this, and they opened up Pandora's box. And it was terrible timing because it was the same time as the COVID pandemic. All these players lost out on a year's worth of playing in a way. Not really, but kind of in a way. I mean, the conferences did it to themselves. I'm looking at you, Big Ten. I'm looking at you, Pac-12. And so it's like now we just have this quasi pay-for-play model that organically came about because of the timing. And I guess what I like, so because they're starting at this, is what they want to do is they want to rein in, because they understand that these collectives are essentially fundraising arms of athletic departments while having, I'm using Stephen Ford, the COO of Country Roads Trust's language, an arm's length agreement with athletic departments. I don't know how in today's, it's the way that the landscape is, that there is not a partnership between the head coaches of at least football, basketball, and maybe baseball, but predominantly football and basketball, that aren't talking with people from Country Roads Trust and saying, and the back and forth and that's why I think West Virginia hired a general manager in Drew Fabianich, is they're working with Country Roads Trust, having essentially a payroll, just like you do with Major League Baseball, and they're going out there. How many guys on the team can just necessarily get by with a full scholarship, which is what everybody was getting prior to just a few years ago, full scholarship, full everything. Then how many guys are we going to go out there and pay through an NIL deal, and how much are we going to pay them? And I mean, hearing I think Jay Kuntz talk about this before on some podcasts. I think it was Country Roads Confidential. West Virginia basically had to pay Jesse Edwards and equivalent to what they would be getting paid in the G League. So you just do the math on that, and G League players getting paid somewhere in the ballpark of around a quarter million for a season, and okay, that's what it's going to take for just a few guys on your basketball team. So it's different with football because you have so many. You don't have to, you can kind of spread the wealth a little bit more around there. But you get what I'm saying is. So setting the floor at 30, so I think I see a lot of problems. it brings about a ton of questions. Number one, if NIL collectives were brought into the athletic department, which is a 501c3, are those donations tax deductible? I don't know, because they currently aren't. And biting under Title IX, I think, well, for one thing, I think schools would have to pick and choose what sports they want to keep and what sports they want to cut, because the reason why it is set up kind of, I feel like the way it is now with the NIL collectives is because these schools do not want to pay the female athletes. And it's nothing against the female athletes. It's just that, non-revenue generating sports, which are, also pretty much all of the female sports at the D1, P5 level, they don't want to pay any of those athletes. I'm talking about from the school's perspective, through the collectives, don't want to have to pay them more than, or even anywhere close to $30,000 per player, because you have to match male player to female player $30,000 or more each. And, third, you're still going to have your problems with football because other schools will pay a player like a Caleb Williams or a Drake May more than $30,000 to go play there. It's kind of a socialistic approach to just say, oh, we're going to pay, half the team $30,000 each, and it's not on a sliding scale. So, again, okay, I'm going to choose to pay Aubrey Burks $30,000, but, a player like Wyatt Milam, you're not going to pay more. I don't know. In any sort of salary cap that's put out there is going to get struck down by the Supreme Court because, on the basis of free enterprise. Pretty much Brett Kavanaugh said that. So that they're not going to restrict players' free market ability to cash in on their name, image, and likeness. So there's still feel like a lot to be figured out to create their own kind of rules. I just don't know how it's necessarily going to work outside of this model of what you currently have, because for the most part, I just don't think. The other thing is, I don't know how much money outside of maybe like these top 20, top 25 programs in college football across the nation have and that they're using toward NIL dollars. I don't know. That information hasn't really necessarily become public information for very long. I mean, I did research for this show. You can find this on USA Today, and you can find the total revenue versus total expenses, so a complete budget for each athletic department in the Power Five. And you look at number one, Ohio State, $250 million. Texas is right behind them. Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, all over $200 million. That's twice as big as West Virginia, coming in at number 45 at $105 million. So it just kind of has me thinking. And okay, so let's just do some quick math here. So hearing that number of just like 750 or 700 on the program, but with Amanda and Brandon Phoenix of the Raspy Voice Kids, saying that just for numbers' sake, $18.67 per month is the monthly subscription for Country Roads Trust to donate. And again, that's not tax deductible, so you're not, when you're doing your tax returns for the years, contributing that against what you're giving. So that's just out-of-pocket paying, which is what you have to do in today's college football world if you want to compete. Is you got to have fans like me, like you, who's listening to this program, give up their hard-earned money to be able to pay it into a pot that's then going to pay out to Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson and Nico Marchiol and this, that, and the other thing. And it's not tax deductible. So that's why I think that's really necessarily challenging. So, I mean, if you just do the math on that, $18.67 for the base package times 12 months, that's $225. $225 a year that you're paying into Country Roads Trust at a bare minimum. You can give up to more. So, bare minimum times 700 members, that's only $157,500. And what did I talk about on one of my last programs about On3's NIL valuation for Wyatt Milam? It's coming down to $500,000. So that right there, if all 700 members right there, I know I'm sure I'm not missing. And then there's corporate sponsorships. I get it. But there's not a Fortune 500 company in the state of West Virginia. And it's not to say that there aren't some awesome boosters out there who donate lots of money to the university and are catching on more word about Country Roads Trust and are realizing that, oh, this is the world has changed. So my dollars toward the Mountaineer Athletic Club might be cut back to give more to Country Roads Trust. So I just go back to what Stephen Ford said about the 2022 season and roster, that all up and down the roster, the NIL that was given out to the entire football roster was right around $1 million. So that was 2022. How much was 2023 being paid? Let's double it. Let's say $2 million, because they did a lot better in retention on some of their stud players, namely like a C.J. Donaldson, for this season, and we see the results. Now what's 2024 going to bring? And all this money that you've now brought in, I think that was an awesome move to have that $1 million May. To have that $1 million May initiative to try and raise as much money as they could. Didn't get there, but to try and raise as much as you could, because money that's budgeted for 2024, you kind of have to have your cash on hand going into the 2024 recruiting cycle, which started Monday. So it's like all this money that's now come in over these last few days by monthly, program joiners, that necessarily wasn't accounted for. So again, if Neil Brown and Drew Fabianich and all the people at Country Roads Trust and Rasheed Marshall and all these people are kind of putting together their payroll for what for the 2024 roster is going to cost you, you had to kind of know that a few weeks ago or even months ago, thinking about it with, how much are we going to pay the high school recruits, how, ballpark of what your to retain your current roster was going to be. And I mean, Neil Brown was pretty upfront and honest about it through these last few interviews that you heard of, on Metro News with Hoppy Kercheval, was saying the trust will be there. The trust will be there. I have full confidence that we're going to be able to retain our core players. We're going to lose some, but that's today. So again, you lost Caden Prather, you lost Jordan Jefferson, you lost Charles Woods last year to the transfer portal, who were core players, and West Virginia did a good job at replacing them. So, but that's how you become one of the upper echelon teams that are ranked in college football perennially and contend for conference championships. And then to even go a step further and going out there and going and recruiting top talent in the transfer portal. So right now, seeing this mix of players, I'm going to be patient. Given how West Virginia did in the transfer portal this past year, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. West Virginia, Neil Brown and his staff have been able to find some gems, really, from the lower levels, or just they brought in from the Power 5 levels, and they've panned out well. So I'm going to give West Virginia the benefit of the doubt. They know what they're doing, and they're going to find the right fits for this program, both for the short term for 2024 and then for the longer term of how they're going to spend it. And we'll talk about all the high school recruitings on probably my next video or for the early signing day period, because West Virginia is bringing in, a few studs who I think necessarily weren't, highly ranked by rivals, but all the players that they're bringing in from the state of Ohio for this class are all state. So it's wow. Okay, maybe they found some, gems that were diamonds in the rough and really panned out for their seniors. So we'll get into that. So it begs the question with this new model that's coming about, and I don't necessarily do think that it's the Power 4 conferences versus the G5 and splitting that. I think it's within the Power 4, which is quickly becoming the Power 2. Again, I gave you the numbers right there, the top 5 programs, and if you look at the top, the top 40 programs, most of them are coming out of the Big Ten and the Big Ten and the SEC. And now Texas, now Oklahoma, who are 2 and 10 respectively, are now SEC programs. And then how quickly does Florida State want to get out of the ACC? given what happened this past week with not getting in the college football playoff, being picked over for an SEC team. So how quickly do they want to get to the SEC? Not only for financial prosperity, but to be able to be viewed on the same level as teams in the SEC. So it's pretty clear that the SEC and the Big Ten are on this different platform than the Big 12 is, and same with the ACC. And it's only going to get worse once this TV money from Fox and ESPN kicks in starting next year. So that great divide is happening before our eyes all in accelerated fashion, starting this year now and just setting the stage for the future. So because West Virginia is not in the SEC, not in the Big Ten, and now we're talking about a super conference, a new Division I, as I've talked about, in which these schools are going to start paying, half of their athletes in however many sports they want to pick. They're going to be paying them $30,000 each. So let's just say right there that you're paying, 200 athletes $30,000 a year each, at least. That's $6 million. That's $6 million more. That okay, how are you finding that? How are you raising that money, especially if it's coming out of the pocketbooks of people who aren't getting these donations as tax write-offs? I'm just very confused at that and how that's going to work for West Virginia, given all the challenges that it faces. Now, again, I think that Mountaineer Nation is elite. The passion that fans have, all across the globe, myself included. Everywhere I go wearing West Virginia stuff and seeing other Mountaineer fans and first thing I talk about. But at the same time, there are just other programs out there across the country that are just playing on a different level. So it begs the question to me, and this has been something that I've been mulling over for a long time, and this is where I want to pitch it to you fans. So please leave your comments here on YouTube, catch me on social media. Would you rather see West Virginia be the top dog? So like many of the top lesser programs that you can think of over the last 15 years. Think of Boise State, think of UCF, think of maybe even a Houston that's made the power, a New Year's 6 games. Maybe some bad examples right there. Or Cincinnati making the college football playoff. Would you rather see West Virginia be the top dog in a lesser league comprised of its traditional rivals, who many of them are on, I feel the same financial standing or worse from an NIL perspective, which is now the name of the game, and also those who are closer in geography. I would never consider NC State a traditional rival, but given that it's not as far away as Kansas State is, that you play in the Big 12, if there was a second cut, if you had a super conference that are comprised of the biggest blue bloods across college football, and I think we can kind of think of who those teams are off the top of our heads, and I've for fun made this as a list before, a lot of the power, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, LSU, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida State, Miami, and Clemson, and then in the Big Ten, elsewhere across the country, USC, Oregon, Washington, Nebraska, Notre Dame, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State. I think that kind of does it right there. I'm probably missing a few out of there, but if those teams all comprise this new Division I super conference. But again, you're paying at such a level to be able to pay those athletes. And again, I think those details will be ironed out, so that $30,000 mark might be high. Would you rather West Virginia then play in a conference with Pitt, Virginia Tech again, Maryland, Cincinnati, Syracuse, pretty much the old Big East, but maybe you get in some new teams like an NC State, who's not that terribly that far away. You get Rutgers back in. Maybe you get a team. You get Louisville back. So that's what I'm kind of wondering is, I mean, if the Big 12 and the ACC trying to kind of merge in a way. That's a way. But again, then there's teams in there in the SEC, like a Vanderbilt in the SEC or a Rutgers in the Big Ten, who just don't belong. Don't belong. They truly don't. They haven't, for all of my life, competed, at the highest level for football. So why should they reap the benefits in a way? I mean, I guess they would be bottom dwellers if you just kept the Big Ten and the SEC as like this new super conference. But again, would you rather see that they get to play against these traditional rivals again, but play it in a lesser division? Again, either to get into the college football playoff, or they have their own separate playoff and West Virginia play for a national championship of like a whole different another level of teams. I'll pitch it out to you. I want to hear what you think about this. Maybe we'll come back to that segment from time to time, and I'm sure the theme of it will come up from time to time. I guess that kind of parlays back into my last point. I haven't talked I haven't talked really at all on this program about basketball. And where I've said is football is still always my number one love. Basketball's lower. I've loved these basketball teams over my years. I've had very great memories over my lifetimes of those, Elite Eight, Sweet 16, obviously the Final Four team in 2010 when I was still in high school. But now, as I've said on previous programs, is like, are we at a watershed moment now? Losing last night to Pitt, 80-63, and like what I've been talking about on this program, do you think we see come to fruition in that the allocated resources financially, both either from the athletic department and Country Roads Trust, are going to be spent more toward football than basketball? Because it looks like a big rebuild for this program. And it's all because of really one guy. It's because Bob Huggins wanted to drink on a Monday afternoon, go on radio, and then, drive around Pittsburgh during a Taylor Swift concert. And I'm still hurting from that because I was as big a fan of Bob Huggins as anyone out there, and thought that he was, everything that you wanted in a West Virginia basketball or football coach personified, and the dedication that he had to the program and everything that he did, with the Norma May Huggins Foundation and the money that he raised and just being a great ambassador for West Virginia athletics. And then that happened. And I'm wondering now if him showing his face around games, especially as we get into the Big 12 meat of the schedule, and they're playing Kansas and they're playing Houston and they're playing these Texas tougher teams, as the games go by and the losses mount up, the finger is pointed more and more by more and more people, even allies of Bob Huggins and fans of him, toward him and what happened in the aftermath of him getting fired. And it's nothing against Josh Eilert, and it's nothing that, I feel like the NCAA cut West Virginia off at the knees when it declined Raekwon Battle's waiver and then suspended Kirk Kriisa for 9 games. And then in the very first exhibition game, charity scrimmage, a cook goes down with a medical condition and misses how many games? And who knows, what is he playing through? Something that is life-threatening and we don't even know about it? I don't know. So it's just I support this basketball program, give all the, want to see them succeed and everything, but you can't win. I mean, you can't win when you only have 7 or 8 guys on the roster and you're fighting tough battles without your strongest soldiers. I mean, 2 of the 3 best players on the team are just, sitting sad on the sidelines. And what does that do for your psyche, to go into practice and go into your workouts and not just not have a winning mentality? And so it's not giving any confidence necessarily for Josh Eilert in his professional development as a first-year head coach. So it's just a really, really tough spot, I feel like. Really tough spot for this program. And it's not to say that I don't want to see the basketball program succeed. I do. But if you look at the 2024 Big 12 and beyond, West Virginia in football can compete now for a conference championship alongside Utah, alongside Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa State. I think some of the newbies are going to come along. I think Arizona has proved a lot of people like they're now a potential power player in this conference. So it's like but the opportunity, I feel like, for football, with everything that West Virginia's got going for it, I feel like, of figuring out this transfer portal and recruiting and all the coaching lessons that I talked about on my last video that I feel like Neil Brown's learned in 5 seasons. And I still think some things are going to come together, and we'll talk about that after the bowl game with some decisions that need to be made, I think, on the defensive side of the football. There's this opportunity, I feel like, for this football program to take it to the next level. So can West Virginia continue to financially support football to the level that it needs to be a perennial top 25 program in this country and across the nation? In basketball, are you going to continue to put those kind of resources? Again, Bob Huggins was paid like a top 10 head coach in college basketball. Neil Brown is still not paid like a top 40 coach in college football. The resources that West Virginia spent in the transfer portal last year to get guys back like Emmett Matthews and Eric Stevenson and all, Joe Toussaint and all those, Trey Mitchell, and now into this year of what they've committed for what's a lost season, in my opinion, to Jesse Edwards, Raekwon Battle, and Kirk Kriza and Akuka Cook. The new guys who haven't really played too much, Brembry and Farrakhan. I don't know if they were getting paid the same kind of money that those other guys are, but I'm sure they paid pretty good money to get those guys for what, again, is going to be, I feel like, a lost season at the end of the day. So, I know I'm painting a dreary picture, I feel like, for college basketball, and because I had Bob Huggins, I feel like, on such a pedestal, I'm still very hurt. I'm still very hurt about that and what it's meant, like what those actions have meant in this short term and what they could potentially mean in the long term for this program. So for now, I'm just gonna keep my distance. I might talk about basketball here or there sporadically, but again, I just think that the West Virginia needs to just get through it. At the end, get through it. That's honestly the best way I can put it. And football, let's see what happens here with these with the roster management in these next coming months. Obviously, this bowl game, and then what's the move? I guess what can we analyze from this portal season through into January that connects some dots that potentially football is moving in the right direction at an accelerated pace that is going to be at the expense of basketball. And I hate to say that, and I don't want that to happen, but in this new world of NIL, does West Virginia's fan base and supportive corporate sponsors in the state, can they give more money in today's economy toward Country Roads Trust to be able to support these players? Because it's the players and what they do on the field that's how you get the results. It's the Jimmies and the Joes. I always say that. So I know I talked a lot. We're almost at an hour. Love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, please comment it. Please like it so more people Mountaineer fans across YouTube can watch this. Share it on social media. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. Also, check out some of the other videos I've talked about a few weeks ago about recruiting and retention and then transfer recruiting and how important it is for this season. Talking about a guy still, nothing's moved on the Jimbo Fisher front, not taking any other of these opening jobs, and are there other college football jobs that would open up that he might be in. So check out some of my other videos, subscribe to my channel. Love to have you subscribe. I already got over 150 for this football season, so I'm so thankful for all you who subscribe. And we'll talk next week. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.